All right, so there's chapter 2. There's literally a sad face. Do y'all see that?
Yeah.
What does that even mean? What? I've never seen that happen before. Okay. That's not what it looks like, but maybe if we get the words up there, it'll be all right. Okay. All right, so chapter 2. Should have read chapter 2 before class. It's all about different professional considerations. We're going to go over some abbreviations that you guys are going to want to know that'll help start making a little bit more sense, tying things together. A self-assessment activity prior to this thing's not showing my links either. It's getting a little closer every time I click on it. Self-assessment activity. You guys need to be familiar with AOTA.org, our national organization. It's going to be something that's a wealth of knowledge for you guys. It's going to be extremely beneficial when you get out in the field to know, hey, what is in my scope of practice, what is not. You know, there's a certain situation, I'm not sure how I'm going to deal with it. AOTA's got resources for all of that stuff, as well as I'm going to talk about state organizations and stuff like that too. All right, so what is professionalism? Faith, what is professionalism? What do you think that means?
A certain standard or behavior that you need to have in order to work.
That's pretty good. Great. What else? What are some other things that come to mind with professionalism? What about you, Jennifer?
I'm sorry.
Oh, you're fine. I understand. Same issues. What comes to mind when you think about professionalism? How would you define it? Right. It seems something obvious, but it's kind of hard to break it down.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember, I probably said this twice at least now, that professionalism is the number one reason that people fail out of fieldworks. It's never knowledge based. Like very, very, very rarely is it because you didn't know something when you went into fieldwork. Because knowledge can be fixed, professionalism cannot. That's why we try to ingrain it into you guys. It's built into every single class, these professional points, and we have an entire lecture today talking about professionalism and ethics. Okay?
Can you like give an example of or two of what has happened and that people aren't being professional in the
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, things like playing on your phone when your supervisor is trying to talk to you, saying inappropriate things in front of patients, asking inappropriate questions in front of patients. There's a time and a place for things. And like your first offense is not, it's multiples. You know, you would think you get to this point in your fieldwork, and you're like, okay, I've got this, but I'm telling you that it happened and happened and happened.
Is it a lot of is there a correlation between age?
Not necessarily. No. This past year, someone young and someone old, and they didn't fail, but we had professional issues. And you know, this is something we have to have awkward meetings about. I don't want to have to, you know, as your fieldwork coordinator, have a conversation with you and you know the director about you playing a game on your phone while you should be treating patients. It's just not, you know, that's the most beneficial part of taking, you know, you're taking everything that we teach you within this year, and then you're going to go out in the field with it and, you know, put it into practice. So you're still learning about, you know, what are the right interventions, you know, and now you're not just learning from us, you're learning from someone watching them actively practice, and then you're going to be practicing by the end of your field works as well. So that's just some, I mean, there's been all kinds of different stuff. Director, when we go and do our fieldwork orientation, there's the way that we say it is the manual that's wrote out for fieldwork. Each rule, there's a name that goes with that rule because someone has done it. No matter how silly it seems, there's a reason it's in there. So, do you think that professionalism, the definition that your book gives is a set of expected behaviors relative to a specific job or setting. Do you think that professionalism differs between different types of jobs? Not much, okay. Why not?
If you're in like
Mm,
you know what I mean?
right. Well, that's what I mean. Like, do you think that someone, if you're going to go, this is the way I described it last year, if you're going to have an interview to go and, work at a fast food restaurant, or you're going to go have an interview to work in, state government, is there a different mindset there when you go in for that interview, or are you going in with the exact same mindset?
I feel like fast food is professional.
Well, it can be. I mean, it absolutely can. If you're interviewing for management or anything in that, I mean, it's a totally different setting. It's a totally different job. Do you have a different mindset when you go in, or a different dress? Are you going to dress in a three-piece suit when you go in for a, interview at your local Wendy's? No, probably not. But if you go in and you're going to work for the health department, or even localized government, you're probably going to wear something more nice and stuff. I think that's really important to take into account, like in the different settings of OT. Do you think there's a difference in how you might interview or professional behaviors in geriatrics compared to pediatrics? Yeah. In what ways is it?
Well, when you're dealing with a child, usually you have more of a childlike wonder. When you're dealing with an adult, well, a lot of times when you're dealing with older patients, sometimes you have to yell if they don't hear well.
Yeah.
But you're also treating them as someone who
Yeah.
can be independent, whereas a child, you're still kind of, you got some labor there.
Okay. So you're going to act totally different when you're treating a child compared to an adult, right? And you'll hear me say a lot, I'm not a pediatric therapist. I would really, if you threw me in with the kid, I think I'd do okay, but I would struggle. You give me an adult, we're solid. I'm good. It's two totally different realms. That's why they ask when you guys do a field work that if you want pediatrics, you ever want to work in pediatrics, you need a field work in pediatrics, because they don't want to hire you without experience, because it's a totally different realm of things. Even all the way down to the way they document is totally different than when you work with adults. Let's talk about an example here. Have you ever interacted with someone in the community who has not been professional? How did it make you feel? Meredith, you want to take that one? Can you give a scenario, or even someone like treated you bad in a drive-through? I mean, whenever.
I was in my old clinic's active
Mm.
We were at Marietta Memorial, and my field work person, teacher, was on her phone in the patient's room.
Okay. Now, how did that make you feel? And on the the other side of it, how do you think the patient felt with that kind of a professional behavior or unprofessional behavior?
Because you don't know if they're talking about
It's very uncomfortable. Cell phones is one of the biggest reasons people get in trouble in their field works. And I always say better safe than sorry, unless you have a family emergency or something coming up. Keep it in, the office space, car, something, keep it away, because it's such a big distraction. Another thing people don't think about as far as professionalism is documentation. Mastering documentation, being able to paint that complete story for the insurance companies and for your supervisors or whoever's looking at your documentation is very, very important. It's a big part of professionalism. And also evidence-based practices, not doing things that aren't, really backed up, or, you're doing research on, or whichever. Making sure that you're up to date on the most evidence-based practice, and, even different technology and things that are out there, different, know your resources. I say that all the time. Knowing what is out there for patients is extremely important. It all ties into professionalism. So being a professional means both with skills and behavior. Some of the skills are assessment, intervention, documentation, clinical reasoning, and ethical decision making. We're going to break down into each of these a little bit. So professional behaviors. Can you give some examples? I'm gonna just go around the room. Allison, you want to take off with self-responsibility there?
Like give an example.
Yeah, give an example of what self-responsibility might mean.
Taking initiative.
Okay.
With a patient.
Okay.
If goes around and you see them kind of just hanging out, you can,
Do what you need. Okay. So in your own, so taking responsibility for yourself. Okay, not necessarily for another patient. What might that include? I kind of think I'm gonna help you out a little bit. Like dependability, even when people aren't even looking. You know, the self-responsible. I don't need someone over my shoulder telling me all the time. You're just trying to make good, ethical decisions all the time. It's also taking responsibility for your own learning and being able to admit when you make a mistake. All right, Faith responds to feedback.
responds to
Yep.
feedback. I would say it sounds almost like a constructive criticism.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So maybe not taking it personally.
Right. Not getting all flustered and mad.
Just
Right.
know that it's work based and it's just helping you become a better OTA.
Right. Perfect answer. It's accepting feedback, and not getting all mad and hey, you know, you don't have to always jump up and defend yourself saying, oh, well, maybe I could have done that better and, you know, move on. Work behaviors, Maggie.
Anything from being a responsible, dependable worker to like following the workplace rules.
Okay. Yeah, for sure. Being, you know, it kind of ties into the next one of time management. Go ahead.
Being on time
Mhm.
and not taking 3 hours to do something that should take 30 minutes.
Right. A lot of the times, you know, requiring that extra time and stuff is not necessarily, you know, what is it? Instead of taking 3 hours, like you said, doing 3 hours, something that should have took 30 minutes, a lot of times it breaks down into just being able to break it down into a schedule or being afraid to ask a question or something like that, you know, trying to figure out something possible on your own, you know, time management, a big part of that might be asking a question. What is the most efficient way of doing this until you've learned it, you know? Jennifer, what about interpersonal skills?
Like before.
Okay. Yeah, that's a big part of it. Your book just kind of defines it as interacting in a professional manner, both with patients, with management, with coworkers, and you know everything in between. Cultural competence, Isaiah.
Being able to kind of acknowledge differences, like if you're dealing with someone of low income or something, you'll be treating them. You might have to alter treatment based on what their insurance can afford.
Okay.
But also just in general, people are different. Understand
Right.
how to deal with different people.
Right. You want to know you're not going to know everybody and everything that makes them mad or you know makes them happy or whatever. But knowing generally you don't do this with this group of people or something. Now, I'm not saying generalizing, but there are certain things you don't want to do, you know, with certain cultures. And then lastly, there, Meredith, communication.
Learn to communicate like not negatively but positively with people.
Yeah, breaking down communication, you know, your verbals and nonverbals, your facial expressions, your just all around your body language, plays a big part into being a professional person. That's another one that's pretty big. People don't really think about, but if you seem uninterested in interventions while your clinical supervisor is trying to teach you something, you know, that can be a big issue. You know, they feel like they're talking to somebody who really doesn't care, you know, that they're not going to be really happy about having you for 8 weeks and, you know, working alongside them if you don't really act like you want to be there and really wanting to learn. All right, so let's talk about some different things here. We have after a kinesiology or exam in kinesiology, Terry says, I can't believe I did this poorly. This teacher is awful. If the teacher had told us what to study, I would have done better. Pat says, I'm glad I made those flashcards on Quizlet. They really helped me to prepare for this exam. What professional behavior did Pat exhibit? Right, but what professional behavior that we just talked about? The self-responsibility, responsive feedback, work behaviors, time management, interpersonal skills, culture competence, and communication. Self-responsibility. That's a big one, right? They took an initiative, not blaming, the instructor. If they would have told me, they would have told me. Taking the initiative, study, do things outside of class that necessarily weren't part of discussion or part of homework and getting better scores. All right, so Terry and Pat are on field work 2. The fieldwork educator asked for more occupation-based intervention and activities. Terry says, there was nothing wrong with the activities I did. I am doing the same thing as everyone else here. Pat says, I see what you mean. Nobody really likes these cones. I saw some videos from Jen Davis on occupation. I'll review them tonight. What professional behavior did Pat exhibit? Responsive feedback. Big one. You're going to get constant feedback from your clinical supervisors and from Professor Turley and I throughout this whole year and into your clinicals. Just taking what we say for what it is, making corrections, and moving forward. We're here to only guide you and help you be better clinicians because we're actually out doing it, practicing, and letting you know this is cool, this is not cool. You need to think about this in a different light. Okay? All right. Terry and Pat get their first OTA jobs. The resident says, I don't want to do a bath now. Come back tomorrow. Terry says, if you keep refusing OT, you're not going to improve or go home. Do you want to stay in this nursing home forever? Let's pause there for a second. That seems like something you would never say, right? It's very easy to say. Very, very easy to say when you work in geriatrics. Is that right, Professor Turley?
Oh, yeah.
You get so frustrated. You have these people that will not work with you no matter what you do, how hard you push them, how much you know that they can get better and how much you can help them. It sounds something crazy, but it's very, very easy to say. Pat says, I don't know, or I didn't know that in your culture you don't bathe after eating. I will come back at 7 tomorrow to help you with your bath. See, what do you think? That was pretty clear cut. What professional behavior was that? Huh? Not quite. Cultural competence. Yep, that's right. All right.
Communication too, though, because
Okay.
maybe Terry didn't communicate with that person about their
Yeah.
cultural needs.
Yeah. So I would say that Terry, instead of just the cultural, I think Pat was more cultural competence, but you can say communication for Terry too, because the way he communicated was not professional, and he didn't take into account cultural competency because he didn't know anything about their culture. He just thought they were refusing, and moving forward, which is super common. The cultural competency, not so much in this area. You're not gonna. I've not worked with that, but I'm not saying you're not going to. More convincing and how to word it with different populations is a lot more of a skill rather than I'm trying to think. I had a lady that was Greek. I think she was Greek, and there were certain things that she wouldn't eat, but I can't remember what it was, and I had to go and tell the kitchen staff that she could. I don't even remember what it was. But that's really the only time I've ever in my practice come up with a cultural competency kind of thing, like don't do this because it'll really offend them. All right, Terry and Pat meet with the supervisor. The supervisor conducts the 90-day review. Terry, you have some good skills, but several residents have requested to have a different treater. Thank you, but you will not be continuing your employment here. Pat, you've done a great job in your first 90 days. The staff and residents are very complimentary. We're lucky to have you here. So that's kind of the end date of how your book gives you a little subsection. That's how it would end. What do you think in those little things that Terry could have done differently to change the outcome at his 90-day review? Nothing. Terry was great. That was very generic. What is a specific thing he could have changed?
Communication.
His communication. How so?
Speaking not in the last scenario, you keep refusing, you're not going to not say that, but be professional.
Okay. How would you take out the cultural competency of that? How would you talk to a patient who doesn't want to get up and do therapy with you? Let's kind of play that scenario out in your head. We'll stay with this one. Okay. I don't want a bath now. Come back tomorrow. How do you talk to a patient and try to get them to work with you?
I might say like, okay, pick a time tomorrow for me to come back.
Okay.
When I will come back.
That's a super important thing that you just said. I'm going to come back to it. What else might you say? It's an idea that we're going to have a whole lecture about. This will make a world of difference in your careers.
Skip again.
Huh?
You can't skip again.
You can't skip again? Maybe not. I guess it depends on the scenario. You know, if they've gone a week and not taken a bath and it's a hygiene issue, you know, maybe say, well, you know, I don't know if I'll be able to tomorrow at December. Right now it's open. Are you sure you don't want to come with me? And how about afterwards we'll go down and get, you know, find out what motivates them. I had one patient that absolutely loved root beer. So anytime I'd say, come work with me and then we'll go get you a root beer. And it worked every single time. Finding out what's important to them, what helps motivate them. What I was going to talk to you about what you said was giving them a choice. Dr. O'Keefe that will come and talk to you guys in psych, he's done his whole life almost research on the idea of choice and letting the patient be in charge and making them feel anyway like they're in charge of their own treatment session. Would you like to do this or would you like to do this? What time works best for you? You know, what's important to you, engaging it around everything about them. That's really OT in a nutshell anyways, that holistic approach, but letting them feel like they're in charge of their therapy rather than someone just dictating and telling them what they have to do constantly is a huge help. You're going to go a lot further with your patients in that way. All right, so let's do a quick little talk about what's professional appearance. What do you think is inappropriate or is appropriate in terms of like shirts or blouses?
Like,
Yeah, what do you think is
shirt
appropriate?
or a blouse? I mean, one or the
Yeah,
other.
like what type of shirt and blouse? Like, can you wear, you know, a sleeveless or, right? So what would be an appropriate wear to go in your clinicals or be in practice? A polo.
A high-neck shirt, just so you're not exposing
Yeah.
yourself.
I wear t-shirts a lot when I'm out in the clinic. It's just, that's me. Scrubs are also acceptable a lot of times. We don't do scrubs because we don't want anybody to think you guys are nursing students. You know, we're our own people over here. Now you'll see us every now and again. We'll wear scrub pants or something for clinical days or scrub tops, but other than that, not very often. Some pediatric rotations will require that you purchase scrubs ahead of time. If you've never worn scrubs, they're pretty awesome. They're like wearing pajamas all day.
I know.
They're
I
so
like
comfortable. I think it's the Smile Doctor or the Wink Doctor or something like that is pretty amazing. Okay, anyway, pants or skirts, what is appropriate in terms of pants or skirts? A khaki, what else? It's not like pants or skirts, it's like
If you
what
have to
type of
wear
those
a
are.
skirt, a
Uh-huh.
longer skirt.
A long skirt, so something below the knee, probably, right? Okay. Do you think that these kind of things change in the setting that you're in? Yeah. Do you think that if you work in a school system that you might get a child who's kind of fearful of somebody working with them? You're going to get better if you're like in a three-piece suit or a very fancy stuff, or if you're wearing like scrub pants and a t-shirt. Right, something like a fun t-shirt makes it a little bit more welcoming. You got to think about that. Now, are you going to go in and this grumpy 80-year-old man who doesn't want to work with anybody to come in and you've got like a SpongeBob scrub top? Do you think you're going to make his day and make him want to come work with you? Probably not, right? I mean, these are things to think about. You don't think about it, but that first interaction you have with the patient is extremely important in deciding whether or not you're going to get a good outcome or a bad outcome. with a patient. You wouldn't think it, but once a patient has any kind of distrust against you for whatever reason, it's very hard to gain that trust back. All right, shoes and socks, what is appropriate? Shoes and socks, what type of shoes? Please, wear socks with your shoes. No, you're fine. What type of shoes? Closed toe shoe. You're not going to wear, sandals and stuff in there. I am a avid lover of Crocs. I think they're the best shoe in the whole world. I haven't worn them here yet because I don't know you guys that well yet, but I will. I have a pretty hefty Croc collection. I'll have a bunch of Crocs in here. Crocs are actually recommended too by the ADA in a lot of scenarios for people. Now, diabetics not really because they can rub sores, but people that struggle getting their shoes on and off, Crocs have a good base. They have lots of grip. Just saying. These shoes I also wear all the time. These are Skechers slip-ons. I recommend these to patients all the time if they're fall hazards. I wear them because I try to normalize it. They are very comfortable shoes. They're not exactly the most stylish thing in the world, but who am I out here to impress? And, if I show them, hey, these shoes are inexpensive. They're really, really good. You don't have to tie them, those kind of things. They're having fine motor issues, that kind of stuff. It's something to take into account. Makes it more normalized. Now they're not buying, these shoes that their doctor told them, specialized $80 shoes. These are $30 on Amazon. It's all about knowing your resources. Socks, just wear them. That's pretty much it. Are hats appropriate in every setting? What might be a setting a hat might be appropriate?
If you're outside.
Okay.
Like at that horseback place.
Okay, that would be one. What about like a community outreach program? Because OTs come up with community outreach programs all the time. That might be a setting where a hat could be acceptable. What type of jewelry might you want to wear? None is probably your best one, right? If you're gonna wear anything, what would you wear? A wedding band would probably be acceptable. Maybe I know a lot of therapists that wear the little rubber ones instead of their actual wedding bands, just to you don't want to lose that thing. What else? A stud earring or not a hoop, because the first thing that someone goes to grab when they fall, earrings, your hair, big time. All right, now hairstyles. What's appropriate? What's not? Pulled up all the time. Your hair should never be down in clinic in any setting, no matter what. It should always be pulled up, never down. If you go to transfer a patient, I'm telling you, they will rip your hair out if they go to fall, because that's the only thing holding that patient back from getting in. I'm telling you, I've seen it happen. It's pretty awful. So pull back, even guys. I've worked with several guys that have long hair, and they pull them back into a man bun kind of deal. And you don't want your hair getting pulled out from a patient, I'm telling you. All right, so different scope of practice and supervision. AOTA is going to be a massive form of or a resource for you guys when you're writing your papers and when you're in practice. The AOTA website is your national one. Does anybody know what the West Virginia one is yet? WVOTA is our state organization. Okay, if you have a question about what's in our scope of practice, what's allowed under an OTA license, etc., you go to WVBOT. Okay, you're going to write that down. That's definitely going to be on your exams. WVBOT.org. West Virginia Board of Occupational Therapy. WVBOT. And really, I've had to do it before too, even out in the field. I'll call and say, hey, is this ethical? Am I allowed to do this? I'll give you a scenario. Our company was short on CNAs and needed people to give baths to people. That's what most CNAs do when they're in home health. And instead of hiring CNAs, they put us down as CNAs, the OTAs, because they know we work on bathing, which is super, super inappropriate. It did not make me happy at all. I was very mad about it. I felt like they were downgrading us. And not to talk bad about CNAs because they're amazing, but we're a profession. We're totally different. So anyway, they put us down, didn't even tell us about it. So I called the board and said, hey, is this ethical? And they were like, that's kind of up to you. You are more than welcome to do the job of CNA. If you want to, you're well overqualified for it. But if you do not want to do it, it's kind of up to you. That scenario, I didn't know. Like, am I allowed to operate underneath that? Because I felt like if I'm doing the services as an OTA, I should bill for OT. Well, then they need an evaluation and all this other stuff. I can't just do it and bill it. So that was a scenario where I had to call them and ask them, hey, what should I do here? All right, so your code of ethics or in core values and all that stuff is on AOTA. You need to go on AOTA.org and familiarize yourself. I'm going to ask on your exam just some basic knowledge questions about the layout about AOTA, just so I know that you went on the website, looked around. It's not going to be anything crazy. It'll be something kind of basic, but I want you to go in and make sure you understand the layout of that website so you guys can find things when you need them. One of the biggest parts of the code of ethics is following the chain of command. Not, if Professor Turley or I do something, like, I didn't like the way they did that in class, you don't run to the university president and say, hey, they said this, and, that's not how this works. You come and talk to us. If you feel like you need to go further, you go to the director. Then, there's a chain of command that you follow. That's the same way with OT. We're going to work through some scenarios here in just a second. If you guys have your books, you want to open them up to page 26. Does everyone have their book with them? Do you have yours? Okay, you guys partner up. Maggie and Lindsay, you guys partner up. And then Jennifer, Isaiah, and Meredith, you guys partner up. On page 26 and 27, you guys, your group of 3, you guys take scenario 2, okay? Maggie and Lindsay, you guys take scenario 3. And Faith and Al, you guys take scenario 4, okay? I want you to work through that scenario. It tells you which ethical principles are involved, and then we're going to discuss what should the OTA do, or OTA is. Okay?
I'm gonna run
Okay.
to the office for real quick.
Okay.
I'll be right back.
Okay. We'll work on that for about 5 minutes or so till 11:30.
Why does it say CODA/L? Is that license?
That's license. Yep. So when you graduate from this, we're going to go over these abbreviations in a second, but OTA is when you graduate from the program. When you pass your board exam, you get the C. When you pay for your licensure with the state, you get the L. Okay? Right now, you're OTA/S.
So what are we doing exactly?
You're going to work through, you're just going to talk about your scenario, and then we're going to come back and talk about them as a group. Okay, so you're kind of answering that question at the end where it says, what should they do? And you're going to defend to me why you should do what you do.
OT is just occupational therapy, registered, like an RN is registered nurse. OTR is then registered, like that. So, DOT is exactly what this is trying to do.
she should have never asked her, you know. She, obviously, it was
I think she is allowed to have overtime, but the OT is trying to prevent that because anybody should be, I think it's only 1%, but anybody should be able to have access to overtime. And she didn't know. Also didn't tell the place game. I know that like my mom's job, if she like works over like a certain amount of hours a week, so she works over like 36 hours a week, then she starts requiring overtime.
and so that she should have told them she went over on Thursday. Just so great.
The problem is by her adjusting her time, she has to actively change the minimum record patients do. She has to record when they start doing it. So what you're running into is going and changing actual patient records to
So she should be.
yeah. Yeah, you don't. You could also you probably started there.
Okay.
Except for yours scenarios.
Number 2, number 3, and number 4. I think number 4 goes on the back page a little bit.
Start there and then you can get to the more.
Yeah.
3, I guess, would be to your discretion. But
I couldn't tell you if there was a scenario.
it's most of them. What do you think?
I would never agree. Never.
But that's why I'm kind of like, she should have known ahead of time how overtime.
Also taking, when you say 3, but I'm not sure about 3, you had a longer career. And so your mindset is that too. Because like, I'm still at like in third mindset level, where you're like,
Definitely hard.
But that's where, I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Do what?
She's just starting.
I think that one's hard to decide the answer.
it doesn't make it right though. So you're still, I think your approach is still correct. I'm just saying like,
Yeah, between these
my
two.
brain would be like, well. But also they can't fire you for something like this. If they do,
I think 2.
by like, taking action for it. Because yeah, if you start with 1 or 2, and then if they try to fire you or try to do
But chain of
anything
command
against
was
you,
in 1.
go to
So you think
action.
number 1?
Or they can.
I think that's,
I don't know.
Next level, actually, like,
you know, because you want to say like, you know, they got caught. You know, you've been caught. So hopefully she would then correct her behavior or his behavior, you know, after that.
It goes to the next page.
Oh, it's all these ones, all your, turn your back pages, see all the abbreviations. See them, here's one.
Mhm.
Most of the people who work under are going to be OTR/L. I think every.
I mean, you've got to, because otherwise, because of the billing. Yep.
You guys ready? All right. You guys ready? Yeah? All right. You guys can go first. Tell me about your scenario.
So, it was
You had number 4, right?
yeah,
Okay.
so basically, they don't have a name here, but
Call him Tim.
Tim,
Tim Dakota.
okay.
Okay.
So he was waiting on his continuing education certificate to come in, and, he was going to miss the renewal period by at least 2 days, so but then he had to work, so basically he wasn't licensed,
Right.
and he went to work anyway. And then, cause he was busy that week and didn't wanna cancel his client appointments. And then it finally did come in, so he worked for a week, or it came in, went to work on July 1st, and then it came in on the 3rd.
Okay.
So, he worked for,
So you worked 2 days without a license.
mhm.
Okay. So what, tell me about the ethical principles that are involved here.
Was not a license.
Well, it tells you there, what are the 2? We're going to go over these in depth here in just a second.
Oh, okay. Justice and veracity.
Okay. What, so I know you don't know what justice is, but read off what it says. What is the problem here?
Documentation of services does not comply with laws. Practitioners must be licensed to provide services.
Okay, so it violates the code of ethics as far as justice. I'll give you a little preview. That's next. But okay, and veracity.
The defendant represented himself as a license when in fact he was not for 2 days. He did not report accurate records in a timely manner.
Okay, so what should that CODA do? What should Tim do? Of your choices there. Let's go. The first thing he should do. That's what I'm asking on this question. What's the first thing that the CODA should do?
We should notify the supervisor what's going on.
Why is that so important?
If anything were to happen
Okay.
to him or the patient,
He just billed time as an unlicensed
Yeah.
practitioner.
that's true too.
And what happens is that falls back on not just the CODA, but the OTR. If they send off on your note, send it in for billing, that's a whole nother ballgame because you just provided services as an unlicensed professional. Pretty big deal. If you don't have a license to practice OT, you build services as one, you know. This is also a scenario, especially in our state association, I would call the state association. I would, after I've talked to my supervisor, I would probably call them and say, hey, this is what happened. I just want to make sure, if I realized it, or if Tim realized it and didn't do it, that's the whole thing. But if you, things get busy and you forgot, they normally have a little bit of a grace period. But in this scenario, there's not. We're saying there's not one. Okay. Going past that date is a pretty big deal. Now, if you're communicating and saying all this stuff is in, generally everybody just goes bad on the 31st of December, and then goes bad every 2 years. Okay. 2 years. Yep. I'm gonna tell you in a second. How many hours that is and the periods of month. Who had number 3? Okay. Talk to us about yours, Jenny. Yeah, Jenny.
If Jenny walked into a crime treatment facility to find her supervised CPR, they could get harmed under the blanket. She later found out that the person told her that the supervising CPR fell asleep, and then she had her with the blanket, which made her mind bleed. And then
The client covered up the OTR. How sweet.
And then later the OTA heard the thing she filled her full position. And then I figured that she would move from the time she was asleep.
Okay. So what ethical principles are involved here?
Well, I'm not this because if something happened, I would have not hurt showering.
Mhm. Big, really big issue, right? Okay.
And then an accident that's kind of obvious being unethical by versus policy or vision.
All treating patients. Yeah.
Justice. We put the veracity
Okay.
because she was curious about the time she
Great. Yeah. Okay. That's good. For sure. So what did the code do first?
Probably confront the OTR.
Okay.
the issues,
Okay.
and they'll fix it before we get
Okay. So let me ask you this scenario, if they just don't for the time. Does that fix it?
most of the time they working with the person. Honestly.
We're not so after billing of the services being provided. Then it's a big issue, but is it necessarily something they're gonna run to the board? And then you could probably handle it in house, right? Taking the scenario, it's that, there's personal issues and things going on. These are people too. They're going to make mistakes. What the bad part is that she time when she was asleep. So it can be corrected. Then you can, on the perfect behavior. Where it's something you're probably going to run straight to the national and say, hey, they're sleep treatment. It's not appropriate. Following the chain of command. Oh, you number two. Sure.
are you supposed to go to the team first?
Your supervisor. Yep. So go. That door supervisor is to follow that chain of command. Next over that probably would be the rehab manager, and then the building manager, and go to the chain of command. Oh, yeah. Especially as it's your direct supervisor, but I mean, scenario exists for a reason. I would say when they're this, but probably nameless. So. Yeah, I think it's funny, but falling asleep patients, I've seen a therapist do that before. But you're talking about the little geriatric patients that keep them in the AD group. And they're watching rerun Andy Griffith all day. Easy. Probably I get them on something. Might not actually find their task something or watch their show. It's not hard to, up all things. It's not hard. I mean, I'm falling asleep in a room. I can see where some have done it before.
Especially if you use the new mom.
Absolutely, but you also can't tell for the time. So, well, Professor, that's what I was actually at, OTR standpoint of it, and letting the OTR know, listen, you were caught is kind of a thing too. Like, listen, I know that this happened. That's unethical, and then taking it from there. If they take that and are like, oh yeah, we need to, fix it and move on and go through the chain of command that way. So, all right, number two.
So a new CODA, licensed CODA, graduated. Oh, what's her name?
Huh? Oh,
Name on it.
oh gosh, Gary.
All right.
This is Gary.
Gary graduated from being hired to work in a long-term care facility by a contract therapy company. During his first week, oh, sorry, it's a woman. I'm just gonna say he.
Gary can be interchangeable.
Okay. during her first week, she clocked in on the first day 8.75 hours.
Okay.
She was scheduled for 8 hours
Mm.
because of a high client load.
Okay.
At the end of the week, the rehab manager, the OT, instructed her to alter her timesheet to reflect 8 hours instead of the 8.75. And this also would include changes to the medical records provided for.
Because she treated someone after that 8 hours. One thing that you didn't mention right there is the unrealistically high productivity demands at 100%. What productivity demands mean is that the entire time that you are clocked in, they're saying 100% of your time should be treating a patient. The entire time. Average right now, I think Genesis is 93 or 94% of your time. So they're allowing you like 6 to 7% of your time. That's just me guessing. That's what it was when I was there. Maybe 90. And anyway, that little leeway is you going to the bathroom, walking to the patient's room, anything that's not billable time falls into that other percentage. So now you think about how overwhelming of that is. 100%, that's unrealistic. You cannot meet that. You can't bill for walking down the hallway yourself without a client, not doing anything with the patient, anything like that. You can't bill for that time. That's unethical. So anyway, that's a very important part about that scenario. So go ahead. There's a whole bunch of ethical things that are being jacked up with this one.
Okay, so the ethical principles.
Yep.
Benefits.
Well, they're listed for you.
No, I was saying is that I was reading the wrong.
Beneficence.
Non-beneficence.
There you go. That's do no harm.
Yeah, the OT pressured the COTA into altering medical records and expected her to meet unrealistic productivity demands.
Okay, so that's an interesting point. You think of do no harm. Was the patient harmed in this? No, who was harmed? The COTA is being harmed. So, you think about do no harm only to patients. That's not true. That's also to yourself, your supervisor, your therapy team. It's do no harm, period. Okay, go ahead.
Justice, the COTA is required by this principle to report to the appropriate authorities any acts that are illegal or unethical.
Okay.
Veracity, the OTA is requesting that the COTA alter documentation of the client's records and also her own timesheet. And then fidelity, the OT is not treating the COTA with respect, fairness, integrity, and is using her position as a rehab manager. And this threatens the COTA's employee status if she does not comply. Not
only has the rehab manager, that's her direct supervisor now. So this really puts you in a tough spot. Now it's the person who signs off on your notes and gives you patients to treat is now telling you to alter your timesheet. It's a pretty big deal, right? So what should the COTA do?
We agreed that the first step should be to just refuse to see how the OT kind of reacts and then see if you can talk it through with them first.
Okay.
They still are your supervisor.
Okay. Let's say now in this scenario, the OTR is still telling you to do it.
They tried to fire me yet.
No.
Probably report them by that point.
Okay, yeah. I would talk to the higher ups at that point because now you're getting into the whole thing. You're not allowed to work off the clock. You can't bill for time that you weren't clocked in for. You can't do that. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on. I completely agree with you. Talk to them first. Say, listen, I'm not going to do that. This 100% productivity demand is just unrealistic for me. I'm going to have time to walk down the hallway, blah, blah, and talk it through. They're still refusing, follow that chain of command. You've already addressed it with, your direct supervisor. You would go to the next step because you can't violate ethics. That goes above everything, right? All right, so let's talk about these COTA ethics now. Beneficence, you're going to want to know these like the back of your hand for exams and practice. Beneficence is do good. Non-malfeasance is do no harm. Autonomy is respect the client's wishes and confidentiality. Justice is do the right thing and be fair. Veracity is be truthful and accurate. And fidelity is respect others. With the idea of autonomy, say you have a patient who tells you something that is very personal in OT, something that's very important to them that they want to be able to get back to doing, but they don't necessarily want it to be around. Who can you discuss these things with? Is it appropriate to go and tell physical therapy or speech or nursing or your OTR? Huh? only if it applies to them. It's a need to know thing, right? Is there any reason that physical therapy should have to know about this goal of the client? I mean, we talk about some extremely personal stuff, that you wouldn't, it's not necessarily a, great conversation to have, but it's things that we talk about with patients that get very, very personal. And you don't want that kind of information to be, spread around the therapy gym if the client has asked you specifically not to, first off, and also to people that have no business knowing it. Is there anything with ethics that you wanted to add, Professor Turley? Or a story of any kind?
Well, I'm not Professor Curly, but I have a question.
You're not? Wow. Okay.
What about if it has to do with our safety?
Then that would be a
that's
need to
something
know.
say.
That would be a need to know. And if they're on the treatment team, so if they don't have physical therapy services, they don't need to know.
Yeah.
Or if they don't have speech therapy services, they don't need to know. Or nursing, etc. They don't need to know that. If you're questioning whether or not something should be shared, you should talk to that with your supervisor and talk to the patient about it as well. Okay? Nothing, you have nothing to add? I can think of a few scenarios where I've seen unethical behaviors.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, share one of those. Story time.
Like between the patient's information being shared?
That could be one. I'll give you a second to think about one if you need one.
Okay, let's see. Had a patient one time who, she was a resident of a nursing home and she was in her 70s. She had had a conversation with someone. Her previous occupation, she had been a stripper.
The resident?
Yep. And she had a conversation with the CNA or somebody, and it had gotten back to some of the therapy staff. And we were all in the gym, and there were a couple of therapists who were just kept poking her, trying to get her to tell that same story to them, which was really inappropriate.
Those kind of scenarios are really,
They were just
uncomfortable.
They just kept poking the bear. They just kept
Yeah.
asking her questions and just trying to get her
Yeah.
to spill out her story, about her being a stripper. And it was just, that obviously had been a private conversation that she
Right.
had.
I
Just got spread around like gossip.
I got a patient who was very embarrassed. She got injured actually having sex, and she didn't want people to know that. But that was the reason she was there. So it was all over our evaluations, and there was no reason, like she didn't need speech therapy, and nursing staff knew because they had her chart and stuff, and OT knew, and physical therapy knew, but speech therapy kind of wanted to, how did she get hurt? How did she get hurt? Even something as simple as that, clearly if the patient wants to share that information, that's their business, but it's not your job to share that information with people, even if and it might be something that
It's a HIPAA violation.
it's a HIPAA violation. You can't just tell somebody that kind of stuff. And you'll believe it or not, patients will ask you that stuff all the time. Like, why are they here? What happened to them? Like they see somebody comes in that's, mangled up and stuff. They want to know, and they're not being nosy and all that. They're just normally genuinely concerned, like, wow, what happened to them? Like they actually want to know. And you can't say anything. That's what you very simply say, well, I'm not allowed to tell you. If they want to tell you, they can tell you, but I'm not allowed to tell you. And then just move on, redirect it. All right, so let's talk a little bit about advocacy. We're always advocating for our profession in West Virginia at a national level. We are always wanting to talk to our legislators about including us in healthcare bills. We often will get overlooked in some scenarios where we definitely could be a part of. We're trying to get in a lot of different areas in West Virginia. We want to get into the jail systems and work with people in prisons to try to, re-engage them in occupations. We're trying to get Medicaid waiver programs to pay for OTA services in school systems and stuff that we currently can't do, but darn near every other state can. There's a lot of things, and we're just advocating for it and building. We're actually going through, I'm working with some state reps right now on a bill to change that Medicaid waiver and include us into it. Last year, it kind of went haywire because a lot of other stuff happened, but it was, yeah, what's up?
When you say Medicaid waiver, do you mean 18 and over, or when you're on the waiting list?
So with waiver, OTAs cannot treat in the school systems, and we're working on the wording with that because there's reason OTRs can, OTAs cannot. So they included occupational therapy, but not OTAs, and it would branch off hundreds of jobs in this state if we get that to go through. It's very simply a wording issue. Last year they tried to open up our Practice Act, and it was this huge thing. I mean, it exploded from every level, from WVBOT. We got lots of nasty emails that was like, "That's not our intention. That's not. You don't ever want to open a Practice Act." But anyway, that is one big goal we're having right now. Another one is we're the only state that doesn't have a definition for a qualified mental health practitioner, which makes it really hard for OTs and OTAs to get into mental health settings and bill for services because there's not a standard definition of mental health practitioners, qualified mental health practitioners. And we're currently working with Charleston to get that done as well. So that's just two big things that we're advocating for. We can't do that without a couple things. It takes money and it takes volunteers. That's why, we strongly advocate it. That's why it's mandatory in the program to be a part of it, but even after the fact, staying part of it because it's literally your job online. I don't know why more people are not, part of the association. All it takes is a membership fee and a meeting like once every 4 months for an hour in an evening. It's not much, but just keeps you informed of, what's going on. The president of our state association is Director Hurt. So we have a direct, she's right there if you have any questions. She's kind of a big wig in OT in West Virginia. Everybody knows her now. And she's a very strong advocate, especially for these two things I've been talking about with the waiver and a mental health practitioner. That's in her lead way. So for WVOTA, that's our state association. I looked at Pennsylvania just because I thought, it's POTA, POTA. I thought that was pretty funny. Any other states, it's normally just the state abbreviation or the first letter of the state and then OTA. That's normally what they are. So each state, like I said, Florida requires a totally separate state exam in order to gain licensure in Florida. Yeah, there's another state like that, but Florida is one of them that you have to take a separate exam, not just MBCOT's exam.
So if you take it there, does it cover all the states?
Yeah, just it's a Florida specific exam. At least it was. Yeah. Yeah, at least it was 2 years ago. They had it. There's 2 or 3 other states that are that way, and they're not like 200 question exams like your MBCOT exam is. It's the national exam, and it's normally, but some states you have to have a separate state licensure exam. I don't know about Virginia.
I remember hearing a lot of,
It very well could be Virginia too. That might be one of them.
everyone in fact last spring kept saying they were going to get their license. I was curious.
Not necessarily instead of, but in spite of. They will get, a lot of people will get Virginia, West Virginia, Ohio, Kentucky, Pennsylvania, and work across state lines. Because you can't have a West Virginia license and practice across state lines. You have to have a state-specific license. And what makes it cool is when you get your MBCOT and you go and schedule it, you can have your scores sent to whatever state you want in multiple states. And then that way you don't have to go through and yeah, it's a big messy thing. But if you want, like a lot of people get I only have West Virginia, but you can get like West Virginia, North Carolina, or whichever you think, and practice in multiple places. That's kind of cool with telehealth. OT services are being provided over telehealth right now, mainly in pediatrics. There are some geriatrics, but a lot of pediatrics is being done telehealth wise. And say if you can be here in West Virginia and provide a telehealth visit to somebody in Oklahoma, but you have to have a state license in whatever state the patient is that you're treating is in. Okay. Make sense? Yeah, it is cool. I have not done telehealth myself. I did it for like half a second. I did like one visit, and I was like, you know what? Let's work this out where I can see you because I don't like it. I'm a hands-on person, but a lot of pediatrics is being done that way. With COVID, it made it wide open, and you could bill Medicare because of that. That was one thing with COVID in the Trump administration. They opened that up big time. We've been trying to get that for a long time. And in home health, occupational, there's this thing called start of care, which is the first person that comes into home health and starts, like, they need nursing services, they need physical therapy, they need speech therapy, whatever. And then the first person that goes in there kind of makes that first decision. OTs weren't allowed to do that. It was physical therapists and RNs were the only two allowed to do that. And now that's been opened. That was another thing got changed in that administration. They just opened that up. Now OTs can do it too. And we fought for that for a really, really, really long time. And now we're able to do that too. So yeah, it's starting to expand more. So we're getting there. All right, so evidence-based practice. I talked about this the other day a whole bunch. I'm not going to really, beat you guys to death with it again. Evidence-based practice is a blend of quality research. Primary literature, is the person or the author, first person primary resource would be another way to think about it. Secondary, that evaluates a number of primary research things like critics of the research or multiples doing the same research. You guys should know by now what quantitative and qualitative research is. Yeah, any questions on those two? You need me to go over them again? All right. A newer one is meta-analysis. That's an examination of data from a number of independent studies of the same subject. So it's taking a whole bunch of studies and analyzing it into one area. Okay, so taking 10 or 12 different studies, looking at them, taking all their data in, making one analysis about it. And then the critically appraised topics, that is a short summary of evidence on a topic of interest. Okay, so it's a short summary. Got me? Any questions on those? Let's talk about why that is so important. Evidence-based practice is, between that and the frames of reference that we talked about, it's going to decide most of your interventions of how you're going to do things, what works, what has been shown to not work, what is contraindicated with certain things, like using heat with somebody who has rheumatoid arthritis. That's contraindicated. Studies show do not do that. It'll make it way worse. Certain things like that. Let's go to table. It's on page 32, I think. I didn't go over the abbreviation. Y'all real quick, go back to, I skipped over something. Go to page 24 because there's some important abbreviations I want you guys to know. All right, so you have OTS, which is an OT student, and then OTAS, which is you guys, is OTA student. OT is a graduate of an accredited program. Let's go over the right side so we did there. You guys can read over the therapist one if you want, but the assistant. OTA is when you've graduated from this program. So when you finish your field work, you've graduated from the program, you are officially an OTA, okay? Once you have passed the national board exam, you get the C and you become a COTA, okay? Once you apply for your state licensure and get it, you get the L. That's how that works. So when you graduate from the program, you drop the S. When you pass your exam, you get the C. When you get your license, you get the L. You actually cannot have the C. You don't have to have it. You have to have it initially. You have to pass your exam and get it first, but you don't have to renew that. I strongly, strongly encourage you to do it. I think it is so much more professional to have that C on your name. You're a certified, you can still practice because you're licensed to do it, but you don't have to have the C. And all that is just a renewal fee, and you have to have a certain amount of credit hours. Any questions on those abbreviations? All right, so table 31. or page 31, table 2.4. These are going to be some really helpful websites, not only in practice, but when you're writing your papers. This is where I told you guys will find articles that are peer reviewed and will help you with all these research projects you guys are going to be working on. Here's a list of acceptable websites. There are more, but this is some good ones. Just keep that, star it, put it in your notes as a helpful little table, okay? When you're searching, sometimes Google's not the best search engine. Sometimes going directly to the source is better. Okay? All right, so let's talk about lifelong learning. The idea of CUs, continuing education, credits and things you have to keep your license and keep the C. NBCOT, which is for your C, they require 36 hours. These are going to be on your exam. Required 36 hours of CUs every 3 years. CEUs. 36. Not in 3 years, it's not that bad. You're only talking 12 every year. Yep. It's not that bad when you break it down, considering that WVBOT for 2 years is when you renew your license is 24. That's also going to be on your exam. For state licensure and renewal, it's 24 hours every 2 years. I primarily do mine online. You can do them in person or online. It'll tell you if it's accepted by AOTA. They'll tell you that this is a CU is accepted by this. There's state conferences that we're hoping that we'll have in person this year. You guys will be a part of. You'll actually get a CU certificate for that too. To use.
Is 36 for NBC?
Yep, 36 is NBCOT, 20, and that's every 3 years. WVBOT is 24 every 2 years.
You can use the same hours for both.
Yes.
Yep.
Right? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the OTA and WVBOT both have conferences.
Yeah.
That
They're where you can go in person. National conferences like the one that's in Texas this year. You get a ton of CUs there. AOTA, they're expensive. Go ahead. You're fine.
No, I didn't mean to speak out loud.
Oh, you're fine. Go ahead. You don't? No. Okay.
So you don't have to start doing those until you get your certified.
You have 2 years
Right.
after your initial licensure.
Okay.
Yep. When you pass your exam, you have 3 years. I forget when NBCOTs go out. They'll send you a million notifications. You get emails. You'll get letters in the mail. Your certification is about to expire. Like they want that they want you to keep your seat. I don't know when mine is due. I just renewed it, but I don't remember when. You should always search out topics that interest you. Like I love working with elderly people, dementia, Alzheimer's patients. So I look a lot at different CUs and research presentations about that kind of stuff for CUs. Don't be one of those people that's like, I'm going to get them all in the last week and I'm going to pay for this online course because you're not going to get anything out of it. You have to do it. You might as well make it a little bit enjoyable where you can, you're not miserable trying to learn something. But the state associations, national associations, you can get a ton of them there. They are expensive. Almost everywhere you go. I use a company called Wild Iris Medical Education, and they, I think for my 24 hours, I paid over $200 for them. But they were something I wanted and I enjoyed, so I was okay paying a little bit extra. But a lot of those companies, if you sign up on their email list, they'll email you coupons like 20% off, 40% off this course and stuff. So what's the big one, Professor Turley? I've never used it, but no, it's OT, occupationaltherapy.com. How did I not remember that? Occupationaltherapy.com is one that has tons of CUs, tons and tons. All right.
But like we have one that we love going to. It's a mental health one, but we did on here and it says you don't offer CUs.
You have to make sure because you don't. I mean, you can go to it if you want to, but they have to be approved by the board. If it says it's approved by AOTA, then it's definitely approved by WV. If you have a question, you can call them and say, hey, this gives CUs, is it going to be acceptable? And move on.
Eating problems.
Yeah, you have to upload your certificates when you get them and stuff, so that's something to keep track of. You know, as soon as you get it, put it in a file where you know it's going to be, because it comes renewal time, you can't find the certificates. They're really hard to get. All right, do you guys have any questions from today's lecture? No? All right, so you have a knowledge assessment. It is 3-ish questions. By the end of this chapter, you should be able to answer the following questions. Terry, the OTA, oh, there's Terry again. Terry, the OTA, often has to stay after work to finish her notes. Sometimes she is 2 or 3 days late with completion. Often the occupational therapist says the notes are unclear and use unapproved abbreviations. Which professional skills and behaviors does Terry need to address? You guys should at least give me 4 or 5 sentences about this scenario for your answer, okay? All right?
Was this due at midnight?
Yep, this is due at midnight tonight. And then you have Pat, the OTA, is working with a client who has a diagnosis they didn't learn about in school. Pat searches the database in the library and finds an article summarizing 12 studies done comparing treatment techniques with this diagnosis. Many of the studies compare client scores on a particular standardized assessment. This article is an example of what, and the research is an example of what. Again, make sure you guys all had the perfect format on your last one. I mean, perfect, with your name as OTAS. Great. Okay, make sure you put the question and your answer, and even on these ones that are multiple choice, you tell me why you chose your answer. So don't just say A, tell me why you chose it, okay? Because if I can't figure out how you're thinking, I really can't help you if you're thinking the wrong way. Help you understand it. All right, you guys have any questions for me?